So at this point, we're going to move on to a topic that is topical for everyone, certainly the province of Ontario, and that is municipal service corporations. So with us, we have an expert in that regard. Mark Rodger from BLG is going to come up and talk about the municipal service corporations, where we're going, how to set one up, and all that good stuff. So Mark, are you here? Yes.
Great. Yeah, to move it forward. Okay, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone, and many thanks to the organizers for including me at your conference at this stunning location. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces and good friends. I've been very fortunate to have many adventures with many of you in this room and your municipalities over the last 35 years, and for me, it's been a real gift. So I wanted to start this discussion about municipal service corporations at my farm, which is known as Hillhead Farm, which is located in Indian River, and that's about midpoint between Peterborough and Norwood. I'm not sure if there's anybody from Norwood or Keene here today. Norwood also has a fabulous fall fair from going back to the 1860s. So why start at my farm? Well, what I do is over the years, I've found old tools and equipment in barns and in the fields and along fence lines. And I pick them up, clean them up, paint them, and mount them on the wall. And I suppose I do this as a form of tribute. In my case, for the Irish settlers who came here to Upper Canada in the 1840s, just around the time of the famine. And just imagine how tough that was. Welcome to Upper Canada. Here's your 100 acres. Now clear your land and remove the stumps and bust the rock and get ready to farm. And it must have been really tough work. And when they did get to the point of the fields, it would have been even tougher because our land isn't that great in our area. It's very dry. Now, you'll also notice on this one that we have a tombstone at the bottom, and we believe we have a couple of pioneer graves on our farm. We don't really like to talk about that too much, so maybe keep that little tidbit for yourself. But my point is that each of these pieces of equipment have a specific purpose to address a particular need, but you first know how to use them properly. And to me, municipal service corporations are the same nature. They are tools, very useful tools in the municipal toolbox, but you have to know how they work and how to use them effectively to get the most for your municipality and for your broader community. So my goal this morning is to provide an overview of municipal service corporations, or MSCs, as I'll call them, which in my experience have become increasingly important as municipalities look for more flexible, business-oriented ways to deliver infrastructure and municipal services. And I would say that of my 35 years of practice, I've never seen municipalities being more willing to be creative than I have in the last 10 years. And we'll talk about some of those experiences later. So I want to touch on the legislative authority for these corporations, the requirements to establish them, why municipalities use them, strategic considerations before creating one, and some examples. And while these can be powerful tools for you, they also involve governance, regulatory, political, and financial considerations that need to be carefully considered. So at the outset, I wanted to briefly distinguish between three different types of corporations that municipalities can own as shareholders. And the first is under the Energy Competition Act. And you'll recall back in 1998, when the province restructured the whole electricity market, and municipalities were mandated to convert their local electric commissions into corporations. And those were known as Section 142 companies. And those are important because those companies can essentially do anything. And that's very different than the MSCs we're going to be talking about. Now, you can't create these corporations anymore, these Section 142, but as I say, you could just about do any business you wanted, construction company, Canadian Tire franchise if you wanted. So they are very different. And for those of you that may have a shell Section 142 company, in other words, one that you created in 2000 that I've never used, they're actually quite valuable. There's actually a market that other municipalities would like to acquire those just because they're kind of unlimited in what they can do. So that's one kind of company, but we're not the type we're talking about today. And then the second corporation, and this is much more recent, is under Bill 60, the Fighting Delays and Building Faster Act. And that gives the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing the power to designate water corporations. And the first one that this will apply to is Peel Region. So what the legislation says, it's going to transfer the water and wastewater system of Peel Region into a corporation to be owned by 3 municipalities, Brampton, Mississauga, and Caledon. So this is supposed to be the test case for this new legislation, but the expectation seems to be that these designated water corporations will be part of the future. But they go beyond regional governments, we're not sure, but this is an important one to watch out for. But our focus is on municipal service corporations under the Municipal Act. And unlike a municipal department, MSC operates as a separate legal entity, has all the powers of a natural person with its own board of directors, governance structures, and other powers. The municipality or municipalities maintain ownership and strategic control through share ownership, and they're frequently used when municipalities want things like operational flexibility, specialized expertise, commercial partnerships, or business style operations. In many ways, MSCs allow municipalities to combine public ownership with private sector operational approaches. Now, the legislative basis. The authority for municipalities to establish MSCs come primarily from Section 203 of the Municipal Act and Ontario Regulation 59906. So the Act authorizes municipalities to incorporate for municipal purposes, either alone or with other municipalities. And the regulation requires detailed procedural and accountability requirements. The province imposed these safeguards because MSCs involve public assets and public accountability, even though they operate corporately. And the legislation, in my view, attempts to balance municipal flexibility, transparency, taxpayer protection, and good governance. Municipalities must therefore follow a prescribed process before establishing an MSC or transferring significant assets into one. So the first threshold question you always have to ask yourself is, do we, as a municipal government, have the authority to pursue a particular service or system? And the answer is not always obvious. It's clearer in the case for things like water services, affordable housing, tourism. But what about an interest in a data center or a construction company or a hotel or a tourist accommodation? And those things are not hypothetical. I've been asked about all of those things as they apply to municipal service corporations. Also, you need to take a look at Ontario Regulation 59906. It's very important because, among other things, it prescribes what securities you can hold in that corporation. In my view, the regulation is too restrictive given the realities that municipalities are faced with. For example, you may have an MSC, you might want to do a public-private partnership, and for the private partner, a limited partnership model is very common. However, under the regulation, these municipal service corporations are prohibited from holding limited partnership units. So there's an example, I think, where MSC should have broader powers, but again, that's a discussion for another day. So how to establish one of these corporations? In this slide, I've tried to summarize the key milestones for setting up a corporation. Again, starting with the threshold question, can we do this? Do we have the legal authority to pursue this activity? And then the all-important business case, and I like to invoke the Harry Truman principle, show me. Show me in the business case why this makes sense to do this. Show me the risks and the costs and the benefits. Show me how our municipality and community are going to be better off. So that's a very important document, the business case, that needs to clearly and effectively address these questions. The form of public consultation isn't prescribed in the legislation, and we see different approaches. Some municipalities have open houses where they invite members of the public and do presentations. Others just have a website. It's all what is the right level of engagement for your community, and that's municipality specific. The USA, or the Unanimous Shareholders Agreement, this is an important point because these corporations, they're incorporated under the Ontario Business Corporations Act. And that's the legislation under which all Ontario corporations, commercial corporations, are incorporated. And what that act allows you to do, in this case as the municipal council, as the shareholder, is remove certain powers from the board of directors and make those decisions dependent on council. So it could be things like starting a new business line, incurring debt over a certain amount. So that shareholders agreement is very important to kind of set out the elements of control and approval you want for your corporation. So establishing a corporation is not simply a matter of filing the articles of incorporation with the province. And again, the regulation imposes several mandatory steps: the business case, assessing the financial implications, conducting public consultation, considering municipal risks, and of course, obtaining council approval. Certain transfer of municipal assets may also require independent valuations, fairness assessments, and compliance with municipal accountability requirements. Depending on the sector involved, additional regulatory approvals may also apply. For example, with water services, they could trigger environmental or ministry approvals, and ultimate liabilities cannot be tracked out, such as under the Safe Drinking Water Act. So you need both legal and financial due diligence before you start down this road. I'll show you a real-life example of a municipal service corporation structure shortly. But we also recommend, if you're considering this, is to create a holding company first. So you have your municipality, holding company, and then the operational subsidiary. And the reason we recommend this is that the holding companies must always be 100% owned by the municipal government. But your subsidiary corporations, you could have shared ownership, including ownership with a private sector company. So this is something to be cautious about, because you want flexibility depending on what the future may look like you and the lines of business you want to go in. Also, I make a reference here at the very bottom of the slide, the relevance of GBE, Government Business Enterprise. This is another really important point. One of the advantages of a municipal service corporation is it can go out and borrow on its own regard. And the GBE, it's an accounting term, but it really means that this is set up as a really true business with independent governance, management, staff, the whole bit. And if you get it categorized as a GBE, then the money that the MSC borrows does not go on the municipal debt balance. So creating these companies as a GBE is a way of, if you like, freeing up debt capacity for the municipality, because it doesn't cut into your legislative requirement. So we're seeing this a lot, in particular regarding water, wastewater corporations. So as I say, it's not a legal treatment, it's an accounting treatment, but I wanted to point that out, that is a particularly meaningful consideration. Now, why are these created? Well, we see several strategic reasons why municipalities consider this. One is operational flexibility. MSCs can often move faster and operate more commercially than municipal departments. Another reason is specialized expertise. Sectors such as renewable energy, rural broadband, or major water, wastewater infrastructure renewal may benefit from an industry-specific approach and management. MSCs can also facilitate partnerships, attract new investment, isolate financial risk, and create new revenue streams for the municipality. In some cases, municipalities view MSCs as vehicles for economic development or for multi-municipality collaboration. And the kinds of applications that I'm seeing and have seen for the last 7 years are MSCs for things like renewable energy, battery storage, district energy, rural broadband, waste management, affordable housing. And let me give you one example just to show you the kind of creativity that I was referring to. We have a municipality, and let's say they have some excess land. So what they do is they create a municipal service corporation, call it LandCo, and the municipality vends that vacant land into the MSC, and then the MSC goes to the market and says to land developers, look, we're going to contribute this land free. We want you developers to build housing, including affordable housing, and we, the MSC, are going to maintain an equity interest in that land development. So it produces housing with a lower cost because the land is free, and the municipality retains an ownership interest in the new development. So it's one example, again, of the kind of creativity that's trying to meet affordable housing needs and attain an ownership interest in some of these projects. So some key considerations. First, is there a genuine business rationale for going through all this process? I wouldn't advise that you just create these because the model appears attractive. Secondly, does your municipality possess the necessary expertise and governance capacity to make this work? Thirdly, is there a real understanding of the long-term financial implications and risks, including debt exposure, capital requirements, and ongoing operational sustainability? There are also other important considerations. Public perception. Sometimes councils are concerned that their corporation may be competing against local businesses. How can we be sure that the corporation is going to be accountable to council? Are there procurement implications, labor relations, tax impacts, and so on? So you may also want to determine, should you do this alone, or are there neighboring municipalities? Is there a better bang for the buck for regional collaboration? Those are all the kind of issues you'd want to think about. Corporate governance is also one of the most important aspects of an MSC. Although municipalities own the corporation, the board of directors have fiduciary duties to the corporation itself. But the municipalities must decide things like how many directors will be appointed, whether independent directors will be used, how the shareholder direction will be exercised. And again, going back to this unanimous shareholders agreement, some key governance questions are, what decisions will the shareholder need to make? How much independence should management and the board have? And how are conflicts between municipal politics and business operation managed? Strong governance frameworks are critical because poorly governed MSCs can create political controversy, financial risk, and accountability concerns. Many successful MSCs operate with professionalized board and clear shareholder direction policies. Clearly, the trend in corporate governance is independent, experienced directors. I'm chairman of a company owned by the city of Peterborough, and we own about 50 megawatts of run-of-the-river water power and solar projects. It's an independent board, but we do have the mayor and a member of council on the board, and I personally find that very helpful to have the mayor on the board or someone from council. It's kind of a good sounding board in terms of the mood of council and what is acceptable or what's not in the community. So my view would be have independent directors, but it is important to have them municipal rep. Also, dividends from these companies can be a new source of revenue for the municipality. And the only thing I'd say about that is these companies operate on a tax-free basis. So you're not paying tax on the dividends that are declared. However, if your municipal service corporation generates more than 10% of its revenue outside your municipal boundaries, then you do come into the tax world. So just a note to be aware of on that. All right, some key considerations. You need to carefully evaluate the capital funding requirements, the borrowing capacity, and again, this critical issue, is it going to be a government business enterprise or not? Because that'll impact your debt balance. What's the revenue stability and what's the revenue model for the corporation? And of course, the potential liabilities. Questions often arise regarding guarantees, shareholder support agreements, indemnities, and insurance coverage. And in regulated sectors, municipalities must also consider compliance costs, licensing obligations, and regulator oversight. And of course, one of the most important considerations is ensuring that the municipality does not unintentionally expose taxpayers to uncontrolled risks. Now, this is a real-life example for a client, City of Port Colborne, and Ryan Boyles, the CAO, is here, and he deserves a lot of credit for moving these types of projects forward. In short, Port Colborne is developing a new industrial park, and its key tenant, it's a $2 billion battery separator plant from the Japanese company Asahi Kasei. So what we did is we were creating a municipal service corporation to provide all the water infrastructure for this industrial park, which will be paid for by this tenant over a period of 25 years. And then as new customers come on, they'll also be served by this company. And we've positioned it that the company can eventually take over all of Port Colborne's water. And, you know, you've probably read in the paper that the province is potentially looking at big changes in Niagara region. So it's possible that these kind of water utilities might extend as part of that discussion. But just to show you here, just some of the contractual path, the big point being that the water, GBE Water, which is our municipal service corporation at the bottom, it's the one that does the contracting with the contractors, with the lenders, with the tenant. You'll see we put in the holding company there, GBE Hold Company. And that is in case Port Colborne decides to do another company, they can just drop down another subsidiary. But I thought this was a very useful current example that came from a public presentation we did a few months ago around Port Colborne. So a practical decision framework. Again, the potential advantages of MSCs can be greater agility, commercial expertise, revenue diversification, and partnership opportunities. However, challenges also exist, and concerns include governance, complexity, public accountability, political interference, transparency, and financial risk exposure. There can also be a tension between commercial objectives and public policy objectives. So municipal councils must therefore carefully determine what degree of independence is appropriate and how will public accountability be maintained. And the success of MSCs, in my experience, often depends less on the corporate structure itself and more on the quality of governance and strategic planning. I just set out here some background reading for those that are interested. I thought these things are all very helpful. And of course, we would be more than happy to talk to you further about any of these issues. And then just maybe finally, to return to my tool analogy, and this slide was generated by AI. I asked for a picture of a multifaceted tool for MSCs, and They came up with this slide in about 5 seconds, which was a little frightening, frankly, but it did kind of capture quite well what I had in mind. So in conclusion, I would say that MSCs provide municipalities with an important strategic tool under Ontario law. They can improve flexibility, they can support specialized operations, facilitate partnerships, and potentially create long-term value for municipalities and taxpayers. Provincial policy changes and infrastructure pressures are driving municipalities to explore more innovative delivery models. And as I say, especially what I'm seeing is in water, wastewater, as we grapple as a province with how are we going to deal with this $150 billion water and wastewater infrastructure renewal and expansion challenge that we have. There's also growing discussions around municipal collaboration within region, public-private partnerships, and attracting institutional investment into municipal infrastructure, such as Canadian pension funds. As municipalities face increasing infrastructure costs, I think MSCs are going to become more significant as flexible delivery vehicles. Having said all this, MSCs are likely not appropriate in every circumstance. You really need to think about governance, financial risk, accountability, regulatory obligations, and what your community's long-term strategic objectives are. But when properly structured and governed, MSCs can be highly effective municipal infrastructure and delivery service platforms. So in closing, I'm going to leave you with two, what I think are very insightful quotes about tools. The first is from American psychologist Abraham Maslow, who said, "If the only tool you have is a hammer, it is tempting to treat everything as if it were a nail." And from Canadian philosopher Marshall McLuhan, "We shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us." Thanks very much. Okay. Okay, sure, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. That gives us lots to think about, doesn't it? So there must be questions out there, but before we get into the questions, just with a show of hands, how many are pursuing an MSC in their municipality? Okay, that's impressive. Excellent. Okay, there's some potential work for you, Mark. Yeah. Okay, so questions, Peter.
Yeah, Peter, I'd say that's exactly right. I would make couple of distinguishing comments, though. The first is the way things are set up now. If you create a water corporation under the Municipal Services Act, under the Municipal Act, then right now, at least, council does set those rates. However, council has to be clear that given the borrowing requirements and the return and everything, it frankly can't play politics with the rates. So there's a question as well about whether the province may punt the rate-making function to an agency like the Ontario Energy Board. And that's a question that has been arisen, but they're concerned for exactly that amount, Peter. They want to kind of make sure that the politics is taken out of water and wastewater rates which frankly has been part of the problem, right? Why we have a bit of a deficit. Rates haven't gone up like they should have, or investments. So it's a way to do that. To distinguish between Bill 60, in those cases, again, it remains to be seen, but it looks like the board of directors can set those rates, not the councils, or the minister may set those rates, review those rates. So that whole question around the rates is yet to be settled, but you're exactly right. One of the goals is for the first time in Ontario, we really can achieve full cost accounting on water wastewater system, which includes the replacement costs down the road. Peter, yep. That's been talked about, but as far as I'm aware, there's been no decision on that at all. But it's the same issue, Peter, we're seeing for electric distribution companies, right? Huge capital needs. The municipalities don't have the excess cash to put more new equity in. So that is the current topic, which I expect will be addressed in the Pulse panel for the LDCs. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I would look at these as each business as a one-off. So the same business case you would do for a wastewater MSC, you would need a distinct business case to create another company, let's say for affordable housing. So each company has to go through its own process. Yeah. Not necessarily. If it was a matter of expanding, if you have a water corporation and you want to expand that over time, you could probably fit that in within the one process and make the business case capture that at the outset. So if it's the same business, easier to expand under one entity. But if it's separate businesses, then you need separate business cases. Yes, sir. Yep. Yeah, one example where we see cross municipal boundaries is in telecom. There are municipal service corporations. The municipality historically provided telephone service. We've created an MSC. They provide multiple municipalities. Again, a big issue there is the tax one. You produce more than 10% of your revenue from outside your own municipal boundaries, then you fall into the different tax world. And also for startups, you also want to get the approval of those other municipal neighbors. So there are financial and tax planning as well as kind of approval considerations you want to be concerned about. We're also seeing it in waste management, recycling. We're in a bit of a process now to create a municipal service corporation for waste management. That would be another example. Yes, sir. I would say ballpark, realistically, it's between 3 and 6 months. And the legal work is predictable. What's unpredictable is the length of time for the business case. And we don't produce the business case. We provide input, but that's kind of like a Grant Thornton, KPMG, Deloitte. That's a very serious exercise, and that can take some time. And then it's getting council comfortable with it. I start off by doing a kind of a similar presentation to this, but then it gets into how are you going to do your stakeholder outreach? The shareholder agreement takes some time because that deals with everything, governance, what powers the municipality takes. So 3 to 6 months is a good ballpark. No, the legislation is pretty general about it, but they all kind of follow the same general path, which is identifying the opportunity and then doing all the due diligence on it. What's it going to cost? What are our rates? How are we going to finance it? What's the profit margin? How are staff dealt with? They do follow a line of similar themes, but there's nothing prescribed. But that's the biggest single bit of work, the business case. Yes, sir. Yes, we believe so. And also Canadian Infrastructure Bank. Gentleman here and then the lady at the back. Yes. Yeah, what we're seeing is things like current plans, current contracts, we transfer over. So just like we did in 1998 with electricity commissions to go to corporations, the municipalities pass a transfer bylaw, and the transfer bylaw deals with all those assets, liabilities, financing that are currently in your PUC or a water department into the company. Yes, ma'am? Yeah, we've seen different approaches to that. I'll give you one example. We have one client, a smaller, well, mid-sized municipality, probably has 150 to 200 million dollars in capital needed, and they just don't have it. They don't have the municipal borrowing capacity, and so what do? So their strategy is to create a water corporation, put everything in there, and they're very interested in doing what's called a concession agreement. So that is, they always own the water utility, the water company, but they enter into essentially like a 30-year lease with big players such as, EPCOR, owned by the city of Edmonton. And all that capital spend, EPCOR does. So we say, this corporation, we're going to own it. We're going to lease it to you for 30 years. The expectation, we as the municipality, is you're going to spend that 200 million. You'll get a return on that, but it's a way. And then, they're not the only one, but they run electric utilities all throughout Alberta and then the US to bring another level of expertise to do this huge capital spend. That would be an example where it's frankly, the municipality itself doesn't know how it's going to do it on itself. That would be an example. Yes, sir. And just one point about water, wastewater, because it comes up. In my 35 years acting for municipalities, I've never had one council had any interest in privatizing water. And this MSC is not a privatization approach. It really is an alternate funding, but I just wanted to be clear on that point. Yes, sir. Yeah, we think a couple of things. We think contractually that can be done. And the other thing that we've seen is rather than imposing development charges, is that the municipality or the MSC, for example, puts in new infrastructure for a subdivision, and then the municipality creates an annual capital charge that goes on each of these homeowners that is paid off over 30 years. That's the other way we've seen it. So, the problem with DCs historically, big upfront charge, the developer pays, passes on the price of homes. What we're seeing now is the MSC charges for the water, wastewater, but the actual capital is paid off over 30 years like a mortgage. So when the new homeowner comes in, they pay their share. If they sell the house, the other owner pays their share, and it's not being subsidized by the other ratepayers. So there's a couple of ways that we're seeing that issue is being handled. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Mark. We've answered questions and we've certainly generated others. So Mark's around, so pick his brain. It's free legal advice. I realize free is a four-letter F word, Mark, but he's around, so take advantage.